So like I just had like we're recording video. I record all my podcasts and I only share the audio. I record in Zoom, but I'm like, it's a whole new year, a whole new like evolution of the business, and we're recording in video.
I love it.
So here we are. Um, Emmie, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure.
We are okay. So first, let me just say first, I love how we are here, how we landed here, because I decided, as some of you have heard, or maybe everyone watching so far knows, that I was transitioning into the new year, and we're going to talk about some of like where this vision came from and what the heck I'm doing. But I sometime last week, it feels like it's been a lot longer, but it really hasn't been that long, opened a Facebook group where I'm going to start building community and like cultivating conversation, hopefully. And I accidentally made the group public instead of private. Total oops on my part. And for some reason, Facebook now, you have to wait like 3 days to switch from public to private. So I just left it. I was like, no one's going to find this. This will be like, I'll just leave it. I'll wait until it goes private, and then I'll start selling the membership and building the community. And you found it.
I just looked right in. I was like, oh, I like Amanda's stuff. So I have been kind of following you for a little bit.
So
And
amazing.
oh, this sounds great. I'll join this community. So yeah, so my name's Emmie Strassberg. I am a life coach and I work with pregnant women. Um, and I'm also a maternal fetal medicine physician and just really interested in coaching around. I think reproductive health is really interesting. Personally, I've been coaching more on pregnancy, preconception, that sort of thing.
So you have a private coaching business and then a full-time job.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very impressed.
Well,
Very impressed.
I don't, I have a few one-on-one clients.
Yeah.
I do like this 6-week course. I'm going to start it again in a couple of weeks called
Cool.
Finding Peace in Pregnancy, where I just do like an hour every Monday and go over basic coaching topics and how they relate to pregnancy. And it's always small, like really small group. It's not like I have a huge coaching business and I'm also doing maternity. That just wouldn't be sustainable, honestly.
But just keeping your head in two places enough is like, I don't know. Maybe it's easy for you because you just do your job like the back of your hand. But for me, it sounds like, whoa, how did she do that?
Well, definitely the physician job takes most of my energy. But I do like to bring coaching concepts to, my patient interactions, and I just think it makes me a better doctor in a lot of ways too.
Yeah. I
Just
recorded, oh, go ahead.
yeah, no, just realizing that like I don't have to control anything. Like it's just so much easier to be a doctor when you come at it with a coach mindset. Just put it that way.
I love that. Those are like, I don't know. Those are words to remember. It's so much easier to be a doctor when you come at it with a coach mindset.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I've also thought about doing some physician coaching just because I'm like, we really need it.
Yeah, burnout.
And I just think there's so much room for improvement in women's health in general.
Yeah.
I mean, medicine and obstetrics specifically is very like patriarchy based, which it really obviously should not be. And I think there's a lot of room for improvement, and I've been working on how I might interface with that a little bit too.
Are there, by the way, if people made it this far, amazing. We're literally just having a conversation. So I could ask anything in this. I don't know where this is going to go, but this is kind of what I want the group to evolve into. It's just these like conversations about being human and how we can improve things and how we can like add value to, in this case, in my following question, are there med schools anywhere in the world or country that are integrating more like mental health training into their schooling, like into the education of medical professionals?
I hope so. I don't know. I'm 12 years out of med school.
Okay.
And I specifically chose to go to osteopathic school because it was more holistic, and honestly, everybody seemed happier.
Yeah, that makes sense. That totally makes sense.
But I think from hearing from some people that I know that work in medical education, it's just the last few years have been extremely difficult to try to figure out how to get medical students trained during a pandemic. Yeah. And so I really hope the mental health aspect is there, but my guess is it's probably like the rest of the country and just not enough.
My brain is just turning. I imagine there are med schools now that have I'm like, you're just making stuff up, hopefully, man, like in hope. But I would imagine there's med schools that have like a program that's known for like diversity, equity, and inclusion, or you know what I mean? Like med schools.
Even that, like when I was in med school, we had to do some full days during orientation on that.
Yeah.
I don't know how, I don't know how enough that really was, to be honest. Because it's kind of like, here's a full day or day and a half of, I think they called it like cultural competency or something like that. It wasn't called diversity, equity, inclusion. It was called
it's
something
not
else.
Competency anything if it's a day or a day and a half.
I don't know. And it was like, I went to school in Fort Lauderdale. So we had a somewhat diverse, population, I guess, as diverse as you're going to get in a med school.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, I don't think it really was quite enough.
No, I'm just curious if that's happening in schools. Even, it makes sense if you went to school 12 years ago, that shift would even still be would be fairly new and maybe not something you saw when you were in school.
Yeah, well, it's really, doctors are in school forever, so we have to do so many credits of continuing medical education each cycle, and it is really prevalent, I would say, in a lot of the continuing medical education programs that I've done, like conferences, and some places more than others, but
yeah,
it's been nice to see that. And our work had training for that I went to, just because I was like, seems like a good thing to go to.
I love it. Okay, well, here's how I imagine the evolution of this group and community, and the way that I hope people start thinking about their well-being is that, like, in reference to your work, I know in my own, I put a couple posts out where I just sort of like dumped, I don't know, 10 things that I thought of in my reproductive history, like ovarian cysts and 17 weeks of bed rest, and like just like all the breast lumps, all of the things we've been through. And when I think back, like even kind of pregnancy to pregnancy, I'm just like thinking as I'm talking, but even pregnancy to pregnancy, all the experiences I've had with my reproductive health and well-being are like very compartmentalized, right? Like, okay, you're here and it seems that you're miscarrying. You're here and you want a termination. Like, you're here and this pregnancy is different than the other pregnancies. Like, so part of my vision for this space is that we as consumers, as like patients and clients and just like humans in the world, find ways to not compartmentalize everything. Like if
Mhm.
your miscarriage is relevant to your pregnancy, your termination is relative to even your breast health. Like you're gonna have memories going back into the offices and like whatever the things are. So my hope is that like I can help people think more about their health in like a holistic way, even if their practitioners aren't thinking or talking about it in that way.
Totally.
So when I say that, like what comes up for you as a physician, as a care provider, like,
I mean, I feel like I've always been taught, my job is to be a detective and a like miner for all the information, right? Because literally all of your medical history is important when you're pregnant,
yeah.
because it can all potentially affect how you move through a pregnancy. Which is why I'm the one in my practice that likes to do preconception consults. Like, I'm the only one that likes to do it. It takes
Interesting.
time
I
and effort
love
and not
it.
a lot of monetary gain.
Yeah.
Um, but I love it because you can just explore like everything that's going on in somebody's life and all the past experiences that they sort of bring to whatever they're planning, right? And is there anything that we need to change or do or talk about? I mean, because we don't have to change anything, right? Like, I know that. Like, I have people that come to me pregnant that if they had come to me preconception, I probably would have had some opinions about maybe
And
they could
yet they are carrying healthy pregnancies.
right, but that's not how life works. So
Yeah.
so you can choose to change your diet, you can choose to start exercising, you can choose to pay attention to your diabetes.
Yeah.
um but to me that's I think it's all pertinent, and then especially when we're talking about high risk pregnancy and mental health, it all is interconnected. Especially in my office, like every single person that I see almost has high blood pressure in my office, and I don't really know what to do with that, because I don't want to treat them like they actually have high blood pressure if my office is the only place they have high blood pressure. And it's probably because they're coming in for an ultrasound and all sorts of other stuff that's going on.
Yeah, I mean, if they're in your office for maternal fetal medicine, not just like regular pregnancy
Yeah, so blood
care,
pressures tend to be higher
they're
in our office.
probably pretty stressed out. Like that would be
I
my
say, look, we're on the third floor, like the millimeters of mercury must just be higher. I don't know.
yeah. Um,
Uh,
it's making me think about and I'm trying to think of what you call it. Is it called direct primary care?
direct
Where
patient care, like direct to consumer care. Mhm.
yeah. Yeah. I did an episode on the Speaking Light into Abortion podcast with somebody who offers that kind of care. And so if she's your general doctor, like she's your direct care provider, um the way I understood it, and I don't know if it always works this way, is that like she will come to the maternal fetal medicine appointment with you. Like she will be in communication with your maternal fetal doctor, with your OBs, with your whoever it is, um,
Mhm.
as a part of providing you holistic care. She is in
I had
touch with
somebody come to their appointment with them, but
you.
aside from
Haven't
like,
had that?
well, no, unless they're in some sort of program where they have like I've had people come with case managers and things like that.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's different.
that's different though.
This is
Yeah.
much different care.
I
I think
actually haven't
it's
had anybody bring a doula, which is interesting because we have had patients with doulas, and I always tell people to be great if they could find a doula. It's just money is
interesting.
always an issue
I
too.
definitely never went to an appointment with anyone when I was a doula.
Yeah, it would be nice
I don't
sometimes.
think.
Just because I feel like sometimes there are times, it was the worst in the pandemic when we were only allowing patients in and not anybody else.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad we're not doing that anymore. But when you are giving somebody unexpected news, it's like, do they really hear
No.
anything?
And I
But you're
do this in
saying
the sense that like their heads are just spinning. How much of that information are they processing?
to
Like,
have somebody with you that can interpret that information, or at least like ask some questions because you're not even thinking of any questions to ask, or you know. I really do appreciate when people bring like their mother or their sister or their friend or somebody with them.
well, I was just thinking, what a great thing for
Partners are
me
good
to
too.
talk about.
Sometimes they're freaking out just as much, you know.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so but that would be a great thing to talk about in the community is like if you're going to an appointment that's different or concerning or that you're a little bit stressed about, like here's how to ask someone to come with you and what qualities would make a great like tag along. I don't know what you call it.
Yeah.
um like some kind of like healthy communication advocate, not because you're broken and you don't understand, but because you're human and it's really hard to digest information when you're in an, at least for me, I love
Yeah,
that
when
you're,
you're in a vulnerable state like
I
that.
know, but I love that you're in a hooded sweatshirt because I'm like, as soon as I
You
see a
said it was
lab coat,
casual.
like show me a lab coat or scrubs of any kind. I don't care if you're a CNA or like a fetal surgeon. I'm like, I immediately shut down.
Oh,
Like,
I do wear scrubs sometimes, but I mostly wear dresses and we don't own white coats. I don't think anyway.
but like that's what happens to so many people in appointments is they're not thinking the same way they're
Yeah.
thinking at home when they're like processing and asking questions and trying to remember information. Like, yeah, imagine if it was the norm that we brought somebody with us to appointments just to digest information.
Yeah. I mean, I just kind of wish in general that there was more community support for pregnant women.
Yeah, certainly.
I think that's an important question I ask, a lot of my patients and my clients too. Like, what kind of community support you have? Who are your people? Like, who
Yeah.
are you
Okay, this
relying
I'm like
on
writing a
outside of
note.
yourself for assistance?
I'm writing a note because I think this would be a really valuable worksheet to bring.
Mhm.
So, or to create. Maybe we can create some of it together right now. So, in the group, which literally just started like yesterday officially, I want to talk about all things, like all things reproductive health and well-being, infertility, pregnancy, terminations, like certain kinds of cancer, certain kinds of like of all the things, right? If you and I, because we're here, so it's going to be you and I, were to create some kind of worksheet or form on an Apple Note or whatever that someone were to take into an appointment to be able to remember vital information and also like check in with themselves and like love themselves through a
Give me
medical.
1 second. I am so
Oh,
sorry. Give me 1 second.
I didn't even notice.
My cat gets really, really mad if she's locked out of here.
That's my dog.
I'm sorry.
And she'll go to one door and scratch and then go to the other door and scratch.
Well, she has a cat door to go through, but she's wearing a cone right now.
Oh, poor thing.
Talk about things to ask when you go to the doctors. She had something removed from her paw, and then we had our neighbor, who's also a vet, come over and basically be like, "I think they removed some normal anatomy from your cat."
Oh,
Like, here she is.
oh, well, seriously, that's a cone. That's the cutest thing ever.
I know. Well, it was much better than the cone. So,
We
anyway,
just
sorry
did
about
the
that.
pillow thing for our dog, but it wasn't watermelon, it was just blue.
Amazon.
Oh, poor kitty.
Amazon purchase. Yeah. So
No,
yeah,
so
I think in general, yeah, to have something to have like
it could even
a
be like
worksheet. Yeah.
before, during, and after. And maybe you fill out whatever parts of it you want, but like, how am I
Right.
feeling what's my check-in with myself before I go into this appointment? Like, what are my questions? What am, what am I most worried about? What am I most excited to learn? Whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then like a during.
Uh-huh.
What are the main takeaways? I want whatever. And then an
Yeah.
after. Like, what did I learn? How do I want to integrate it into my life? Are there things I need to research? Are there things, or do I want to invite in
So just
other
kind of
people's
like
opinions?
CTFAR in your entire doctor's appointment. Just put it in a model. Yeah.
Right? Like, what is the model for going to appointments so that you, okay, the goal, the result that we want is that people are leaving appointments, leaving their own medical care, feeling empowered.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't, this maybe this already exists, and I'm just like making it up as if I have this new brilliant idea.
We had this whole thing when I was in training. It's like Geisinger, which is in central Pennsylvania. And it was this whole like acronym. I don't remember any of it, much of it anymore. It was all like CI care, it was called. And the like, what's the C? I don't even remember. But it was like introduce. It was like all these things you were supposed to do with a patient. We were supposed to come in, introduce yourself, like sort of start the appointment, and then you sort of like ended the appointment with a summary, and then anyway, it was actually kind of a really nice idea. And
Yeah,
I do a
yeah,
lot of the stuff, I just don't remember the acronym. Um, and a lot of that stuff I feel is hokey, but I actually thought that was pretty good. Like to just have a checklist in your mind of like that's patient centered, right? Like it's not like your agenda, it's it's incorporating the patient and what they need.
yeah.
Um,
Like, how do
but
you leave any kind of care, medical, alternative, coaching, I mean, therapy, like
chiropractor, no.
anything? How do you leave any kind of care feeling like an empowered human who is making like conscious decisions about their own well-being? Like,
I think asking the right questions is really important because sometimes I, as a physician, forget to tell patients why, like the plan is the plan, right?
because you're doing it all day long, it makes so much sense to you. Yeah.
Right. Like, well, if you have gestational diabetes, we're going to see you this frequently, and then we're going to start like really intensively monitoring you at the end of the pregnancy. And, of course, at that, a lot of people are like, I have a life. Like, how am I supposed to do that? And then kind of explaining why it's the recommendation. I've learned the hard way to be like, it is optional. Like, you do not, like, I am not forcing you to do this. You are
Yeah.
not a prisoner to this office. Like, you can opt out, but here are the reasons that we do it, just so you fully understand.
Yeah.
So I think that part of the communication is really important, right? Like, it's not like just be like, and no, at the end of the pregnancy, I'm going to see you all the time because it's super fun for me. And I don't know, I mean, it is fun, but because we get to kind of know people really well by the end, but that's
Yeah.
not why we do it. Um,
And
or
also,
you just
like, I mean, that's one of those things like we can give statistics. I'm just thinking gestational diabetes, right? Like we can give statistics. I don't know the statistic. How many pregnancies have gestational diabetes?
about 5 to 8%.
Okay, so oh, that's pretty small.
Yeah, I feel like it's more than that, but maybe that's just my office has more than that because I do high risk. I don't know.
That's interesting. Well, that was like a lot lower than I expected you to say, which is great. That's awesome.
Uh,
But even just the kind of care that's like, and maybe this is what you integrate because you have coaching experience to add to your practice, but like I know it feels like you're alone because maybe no one has done it this way, but like this number of pregnancies are experiencing the same thing. They might not be talking, but like just kind of normalizing so that people feel like they're a part of their care.
yeah.
I feel like that's probably what you do because you have that lens.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of, this is probably like a whole huge other topic. A lot of shame put on pregnant women, and a lot of shame pregnant women put on themselves, especially with things like gestational diabetes, of like, well, if I could just be better, like somehow,
Yeah.
if I
Yeah.
could
If
just be
my body
better, then I could,
worked.
like, this is in my control, when sometimes it's really not.
Totally. And even if it is in your control, like, what does that mean, right?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
maybe, yeah, you could eat better, but you're also a single mom raising 3 kids and running
Working,
around like a
you know,
crazy.
3
So, like,
jobs, night shift, and yeah.
what kind of control are we talking about? Like, we have to factor all that in. Um,
Exactly.
I think shame is huge
Well,
in
and
all.
the stress that women put on themselves to like to be better, right?
Yeah,
Whatever that means, like just tracking things and exercising and,
yeah.
you know, I don't know. I have special like gestational diabetics who like have all these like trying all the different foods and like, well, this didn't work and this didn't work. It's like, hey, but that's okay. Like we have
And trying
medication.
to prove, I feel like there was a lot of like, I'm so glad that I'm done with the pregnancy stage, but like a lot of wanting to like prove you did everything you could, right? And then
Yeah,
feeling bad if you didn't do everything you could, as if we're all supposed to do everything we can all the time. Like that
right,
expectations are so high.
right. Yeah, and I mean, and some people just can't. Like they just are not in a place where they can do more than they're doing
Yeah. Yeah. For whatever reason.
for whatever reason. And
Mental, emotional,
you
spiritual.
gotta meet them where they're at, you know? It's not
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Geographical,
on top of
exactly.
that, be like, well, you're being a terrible pregnant person.
Yeah.
Not helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, I'm totally making this worksheet. I'm gonna see
Yeah,
where it lands. I'm really fascinated by what it would look like. I'm sure there's tons of books written and whatever about like getting like feeling empowered in your receiving of care. Um,
yeah. I think,
I'll find
you
them.
know, the way that I've approached it in the coaching business is to start with self-care, right? Start by seeing what's there, like we do with, you know, coaching in general, like what thoughts are there, bringing awareness to it, bringing in the self-compassion before you do anything else.
Yeah.
So without awareness and self-compassion, we're not going anywhere. um, and then really moving towards like maybe we need to stop and feel an emotion, um, before we do anything else. Maybe we just need to sit with an emotion, and then maybe we can figure out what kind of action we want to take.
Yeah. That's really interesting. But that happens a lot where like even the controlling of the diet or the obsessing about the exercise is really in some ways what we would call like buffering, right? Like avoiding feeling.
Right,
Like
like
if
if I
I
can just
do all
action my
these
way out of
things,
this, yeah.
I won't have to feel the actual fear I'm feeling or the sadness or the whatever. Um
Yeah, or vulnerability.
yeah.
I mean, I think so much about pregnancy too. I mean, there's a lot about being a woman where I feel like you're facing your own mortality, but pregnancy is a big one, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a lot that comes with having to face that one way or another.
And it's like there's the whole like medical piece of pregnancy, and then there's the you're actually going to go home with a baby and be a parent,
Mhm.
and your entire life is going to change. Like
I mean, at some point, you literally split into 2 separate people,
it's
sometimes 3,
wild.
or more. Yeah,
Yeah. Do you have kids?
I have one. I
You
have
have
one.
how
I've
old?
only been pregnant once. I've been very lucky to have a wonderful pregnancy, um, that was planned, and then not have any more, which was also planned. So I always thought we wanted to have 2, but believe I did not sleep for eight months, which was a lot.
Were you working in that time?
Yeah, I was working. I went back to work after 8 weeks, which was actually like I was dying to go back to work.
I'm like you probably hate this. I don't know. I don't know how actual medical professionals feel about this, but I'm binging Grey's Anatomy right now. Like I went back.
Oh yeah, I've been banned from watching with my husband.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. Like even I know well enough to be like screaming at the TV. However, I'm like totally obsessing right now. And anyway, yeah.
She writes good story.
She's like one of the surgeons is like on maternity leave, and like get me back in the OR. Like this is so much easier to operate on people
So
than
much easier to deal with work than it is with a baby. I mean, for me it was. And I love, like, my kid's 4 now and it's a great age and it's wonderful, but the baby stage was hard.
Yeah, it's total upheaval. Yeah. Wait, how did we get there?
Because you're asking me if I had any kids.
Yeah, but you were saying something before that like I had a point in asking you, and now I forgot what it was.
Yeah, it's just like that you split into more than one.
Oh,
Like you split into more than one person.
yeah.
And then I always, have felt like I could empathize with I forget whose quote it is, but like having a child is like having your heart on the outside.
Yeah,
Just feel
I
like
know. I
that.
don't know whose quote that is either, but it's really true. I don't know if you went to any, like, did you go to any of the like parenting support groups when you were, or like
No, because I'm a doctor, I'm just supposed to know these
Yeah,
things. I mean,
exactly.
that's like the stupid thinking that I had, right?
Exactly. I remember going to the breastfeeding group like weekly, religiously. Never had any problems breastfeeding. I just literally wanted to be in a room with other moms who were going through the same thing I was.
Yeah.
And like I look back now and I'm really grateful for that. But I felt like I remember some weeks I had to like, I didn't have to. I felt like I had to like come up with a breastfeeding question just to be in the room. Really what I wanted was just like straight up new moms group, but like all I could find was breastfeeding group. So like that was my way of getting in the room and not feeling like so alone and
Yeah. I had a good friend who
overwhelmed.
had a baby about 3 months before I did. But she actually, it was her second, and she had a bit of a rough time. She's actually doula. She was like kind of my doula, but because she had her own baby not very long before I had mine, it just, she was good support, but she also needed her own support. um, and I did like the biggest thing was I was part of this online. There's a Facebook group called Dr. Milk.
Dr. Milk?
Dr. Milk, it's for
Okay.
physician breastfeeding moms or physicians that just need to like take care of lactating patients. It's all a lot of like really interesting
Cool. Yeah.
continuing medical education. Some people who are like certified in breastfeeding. I forget what the certification is, but if without that group, I would not have figured out that my kid had a tongue and a lip tie, and that was why it was so painful and difficult for me to breastfeed. And so we had that fixed at about 5 months. That was part
You
of the
made it to 5 months?
I made it to 9 months, but we supplemented.
No, I mean like with the tie not being fixed.
Yeah, it was very painful. I saw several lactation consultants. They're like, "Oh, he's fine." And then I brought him to a feeding specialist, and they weren't really quite sure what was wrong. And I finally brought him like through like my research on the group. I'm like, well, I need to bring him to a pediatric dentist. And I brought him to a pediatric dentist, this amazing woman that's here not far from us. And it was just such a relief to be like, oh, there is something wrong with him and not with me. Like, I'm
Yeah,
not.
5 months is a long time to nurse with a tongue. I mean, they're all.
Well, he's still getting laser on he has buccal ties too. So he's still getting dental therapy for this.
I can probably say the same. Like, my third had a tie. And if I weren't in, like, at that point, I was a doula and I was like really active in the world, and all my best friends were like midwives and OBs and lactation consultants, and I don't know that I would have known if that weren't my world. And that was game changer. Like, I had nurse too with no problems, and then with him, he had a tie, and as soon as I took him, like, everything changed. I can't imagine having done 5 months.
Yeah, well, it just, we never really established a great breastfeeding relationship, but
Yeah.
you know what? He's healthy, he's happy. I personally was not breastfed because my mother had, I think part of the reason I became a high risk OB is my mother had very difficult pregnancies
Mm.
for health reasons, and she wasn't able to breastfeed me because of medication that she was on.
Yeah.
I feel like it turned out okay. I don't know.
It seems that you
Like
did.
I'm okay.
It seems
My
that
brother
you
was
did.
breastfed. I mean, he's a doctor too, so I don't know. I guess he turned out okay.
Turns out you would have two doctors in a family, one breastfed and one not.
He still turned
Shocking.
out fine.
It's
Very different people, but very fine.
You're both functioning humans.
Yeah.
Okay. I know you said at the beginning, like, I want to ask you some questions. Do you have any questions for me that you
Yes.
could wrap
Yeah.
up with?
So I'm really excited to hear about like how the idea of this expanded, because I know your niche has been abortion,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is a really, really important area. And how you came to want to expand on that and do this work, because I've also felt like, well, it just seemed really appropriate for me to do the pregnancy as a niche, but there's a lot of other things that I feel called to speak to and be a part of that are broader spectrum. So I was really kind of excited to
Yeah.
see.
I think I had to, well, I definitely had to go through my own abortion to be able to do that work. And I think I had to do um the level of like niching in to like really feel like I recorded a podcast today, so you can listen to it tomorrow, that explains a lot of this. um but I really, the abortion work is so important, just like you said, and I don't plan to stop doing it. I plan to keep doing it. The way I plan on integrating it into the group is I I want the group to be like a hub, like a community. I want like loads of links and resources. And like if you're struggling with like a medically challenging pregnancy, like here's the experts, this is where to go, these are your resources. If you're struggling with fertility, here's the go-to, here's your resources. And so the way I imagine it is like, if you're struggling with termination or abortion, I am the expert, come to me. Like, so I do want to keep doing that work because I think I've barely scratched the surface of what needs to be said in the world. And I was going to say, and I think like I I left college. I've always been really drawn to women's health. Um, I left college and went to midwifery school, but not like you. I went to like home birth midwifery school. Um, Totally felt really passionate about that. Took that journey through like exploring pregnancy and birth in America, and like lots of direction there. Then I did a lot of doula work. I've had like all these compartments of my life that are tied together by just like general reproductive well-being. And it's kind of like what I was saying at the beginning. I think we do a lot of compartmentalizing. Like, oh, I had the one pregnancy where I was on bed rest, and then I had the home birth, and then I had the abortion. And I just want us more to look at ourselves as like whole human beings. And I think in the abortion work, one of the things I've learned is most important is like, yes, We definitely want to pay attention. We want to process. We want to talk about it. We want to tell our stories. But where the real healing happens is when you take that and then you integrate it into the rest of your life. Like, here's what I learned from my abortion. This is like how it became a transformative part of my life. That's when you grow. Like, that's when you expand. That's when you thrive. And so I want us to be able to do that as like whole human beings with our entire reproductive journeys. Because I think, I don't know, we're freaking amazing. Like, whether you're born with a uterus and you decide to remove it, or you're born with a uterus and you identify as a different gender, like, I do think we have some spiritual, energetic, like badass power as humans who like are fertile in this way and bleed and cleanse and like the whole thing. And I think like a lot of times when you talk about that or hear about it, it's in this very like fairy goddess spirit, be one with nature and bleed in the woods. And like, that's great. And I love it. But I want spaces where we can like harness that power as just regular human beings in business suits and yoga pants.
I was having a conversation with a local doula here, and we were talking about like the pregnancy course I was doing. She's like, this is great and all, but like, how do you make this more mainstream? I'm like, exactly.
Yes, exactly.
When you were talking, I was just thinking about your previous question, like, how do we come out of the experience empowered? And I think you kind of just said it. So for one, we know how to inform ourselves with the correct information. By correct, like correct for us, like there's no correct information, but where are our resources that are going to help us with our experience, that are external, but also importantly, like where are internal resources, like where are internal connections to our bodies, the spiritual world and higher power, if you believe in that, which I don't know, maybe you don't, but
people who follow me probably just by default have some connection.
Some connection. I mean, if you're connecting to your own body, that's kind of a spiritual process as well.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
But like, where's your own internal wisdom? Because that's super important. Because it's not very empowering to always need external validation and external, like I'm always find myself thinking like, well, if I just read this book or I just did another certification, or I'm like, okay, but I have 2 board certifications in medicine and a coach certification, and like maybe we can just say that I know a few things.
Maybe I know enough to like help some people.
Maybe I could actually speak to something. I don't know. So knowing like where you already have some information and how to tap into that. And seeing the value in that, right? And then also knowing where to look if you need further help. And part of that external library of places to look is the community that you surround yourself in.
Yes. I actually, yeah. And I think the unique angle I want to take with this community is very much based in like, the somatic experience, the mindset experience, the like, like I don't I've thought a lot about what am I going to do when someone comes into their group and they're like, I got diagnosed with XYZ, what should I do? And like, I don't, like, it's like, like I don't want like a medical advice place, you know, like that's why I want to have lots of resources. It's like, let's talk about how you feel about that diagnosis and you go get the information you need from the expert.
Right.
So I do have some like questions about how that will all play out. Like, how do you create community where people can well balance like their internal knowing and like external information and resources, and not be seeking like your neighbor for medical advice.
The other problem with like people saying I've been diagnosed with this is a lot of the time like I've noticed patients that have been diagnosed with stuff. I'm like, I don't even know if that's really true. Like that there are some definitely not correct diagnoses that happen, and people start taking them on as identities, which I think is
So true.
the opposite of empowering sometimes. I mean, actually, sometimes it can be quite empowering, but I think there are other times where it's like, there is much more interesting and powerful things about you than like this one doctor that said you might have PCOS, but actually you've had 3 kids and you get regular periods. So that doesn't make any sense, you know?
Yeah. It's making me want to look up I do this a lot. I'm like, I want to look up the word diagnosis. Like, I think you're right. Like we take these diagnoses and instead of making them a piece of who we are, and this is the abortion work too. It's like so many people come to me and instead of making abortion a piece of their reproductive being, experience, well-being, they make it their identity. Like, and then they can't like the over attaching to a diagnosis or an experience or which I get why we do it. Like we're coaches, like we understand why we make those attachments, but like let's help each other break those attachments and those like
Right. It's the important of the and, right? Like I'm someone who has had an abortion and also
exactly and
experiences in my life and potential for other things.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't know. Now I'm like trying to read the diagnosis or definition of diagnosis, and I'm gonna go down a rabbit hole if I do that. So
Yeah.
did I even answer your question? Do you have more follow-up questions about like how I'm visioning this or what I'm hoping
No,
to
I think that makes sense. Just to have a space to talk about being a woman or a person with uterus in this world right now and what that means.
Yeah.
I guess
Yeah,
there's
and
some
like trying
people
to
without uteruses that identify as women too, but that I don't know, might be a different experience.
that's actually been a challenge for me is like finding inclusive language, but also not like see, I even struggle like as soon as I start to talk about it. But I'm like, I very much want to use inclusive language, but at the same time, like the vast majority of people who will find this community are women, and like some things are very specific if you identify as a cis woman. Like, so anyway, I hope like I built the sales page for this membership community so carefully, trying to use wording that was inclusive and wouldn't, would help welcome all people.
Yeah.
Then at the like, I remember when I did it too. I added this section at the top of the sales page. It's like one paragraph at the top that basically said, you can read the rest of the sales page, but you don't need to. You can just join.
Yeah.
And in it, it was this like fleeting moment where I added that paragraph and I wrote sisterhood. And then a non-binary friend read it and was like, it seems like a lot of your language was inclusive. And then you wrote sisterhood at the top, and I'm confused. I'm like, damn it, I did it. Like just out of habit, I just wrote sisterhood. Even though I've worked so hard to like make the whole page inclusive. I'm like, I'm trying.
Well, could it? I don't know. I mean, I feel like sisterhood is I don't know. It's hard.
I don't
mean,
know.
it's not as hard as being non-binary, I'm sure, or trans. We'll put it that way. It's not that hard, but it is certainly a challenge.
Yeah. So,
and I'm not as careful about that as I could be in the language of and my website, and even the American College of OBGYN and Society for Maternal Fetal Medicine has gotten very good about writing pregnant people and being much more inclusive in their language. It's even harder, like writing research papers now too, because I was just like, well, they were women, but we could maybe just refer to them as pregnant people and in the research paper too, you know.
No, it's amazing how like the pathways of the language we used. Like, I'm only in my 40s. I'm like, come on, like, why is this so hard for me?
Well, it's hard for you. Imagine like how hard it is for like, I don't know, people my parents' age, or my mother is still like, I want to be like, but like wrapping my head around this is really hard, you know. I mean, I don't know, she hasn't said anything specific to me, but I've noticed that for people, not everybody, I don't want to generalize, but for generations past, a lot of like, I feel like it's, you know, a challenge enough for me to try to be as inclusive, but because they had literally no upbringing that way, like,
Yeah.
it's
I was
hard.
just having a conversation with my dad on the chairlift today. And somehow it was similar to that, where I was like, oh yeah, he's not processing this the same way that I am, just because his language is different. I don't remember what the conversation was about. It was not about gender, but it's the same idea of like, yeah, we want to, when we're in our 20s or whatever, we want to think that we won't age and our minds won't like become more like focused and
Well, even
close.
parenting, it's a challenge to just not like react to what I've been cultured to react to. Because I mean, I took my son for a haircut today, and he got this cute, like, I don't know, boys haircut, and they put gel in it. It was really cute. And then he wanted to buy this headband, and this headband had like rainbows and unicorns. And I'm like, I noticed my initial like response wanted to be like, no, that's for girls. And I'm like, what the
Yeah.
heck? Like, it's for anybody who wants it. And why shouldn't he have this headband? But, like, I mean, other than maybe I don't buy him everything that he has a whim to have.
Right. But
So we
yeah,
just
it
he
takes,
wore it and he loved it. Like
oh,
you could tell his face went from like, this new haircut, it feels weird on me, to like, I am amazing and magical with my new headband, you
this
know.
is so beautiful. I love it. Headbands for everyone.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting if we don't put any parameters, like, because I certainly don't want to put parameters on him.
I know.
I'm sure I do. I know I do all the time, unintentionally. But if I think about it, I'm like, no, he can wear pink. He can,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. I think probably.
wear girls stuff. I mean, for lack of a better word, it doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
I would guess that like if left to our own like lack of socialization, gender would just be so much more fluid and just like non-existent. Like it's really just so much learned behavior. Yeah.
Yeah, but it is fascinating how much language shapes that.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And it shapes how we give and receive care.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. We've been talking for a while. Is there anything we will keep talking in the community? But is there anything you feel is left unsaid that we can talk about? Is there okay, here's a question.
Uh-huh.
In your specialty, in your work, is there anything you want listeners who are seeing maternal fetal physicians or are in high risk pregnancies or are just in pregnancies? Is there any message you want to give those people so that they can integrate their experience as like part of their whole human being?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of fear sometimes in the things that we talk about, because we talk about risks and we talk about worst case scenarios a lot,
Yeah.
because that's part of why we exist, right?
Yeah.
We exist to try to prevent worst case scenarios in people that are, it's more probable for that to happen in, for better or for worse. And the statistics aren't perfect. I mean, you always say like, what, there's lies, there's damn lies, and there's statistics. And the statistics don't matter if you're like the one person that it happens to, or the one person that it doesn't happen to, but that had to do all the things.
Yeah.
But I think just asking questions, like having open communication with your doctor, I think is really important to know what they're thinking, how worried are they really, if there's any action items that you can do. And a lot of time there isn't. I mean, maybe stop smoking. That'd be great. Um, it doesn't always work for people to stop smoking in pregnancy, but it would be nice because we know that one for sure we know is tied to a lot of things that we'd prefer not to happen. But yeah, just also learning to trust your own body, because I think what I see a lot is people fearing their body.
Yeah.
And fearing the lack of control.
Yeah.
But more than any, I don't know, more than any other advice, I think just learning to know your own body in pregnancy. I mean, it's the best time to learn how your body is and get to know your body and what it feels like when it's well and what it feels like when it's not well, and get to know your baby throughout the pregnancy, like what that like, just really getting in your body.
Yeah.
Super, super important.
Yeah.
And the wisdom that you have with the integration of all that is just as important as whatever is going on with like the ultrasounds and the measurement of like growth curves are like, let's just say, take every growth curve with a grain of salt. There are certainly situations where we want to be uber cautious, but yeah, anyway, there's just, I think, a lot that we talk about that ends up creating a lot of fear, that that's not really the intention of what we do. You know, the intention is, hey, is there anything that we need to monitor? Is there anything we need to plan for after delivery? Or in some cases, like, do we need to set you up with a termination because this is something that's not going to work out for you? Or is there a life-threatening condition that we need to manage? Like, that's the really important stuff. But the in-between stuff where we're monitoring things that are very uncertain, that's really the time to just kind of get to know and trust your body.
Oh, just the thing that applies to all of life. No one trusts
All of life.
body.
I mean, I always tell my patients, like, okay, but here's all the info, but you are the expert in your own body. Like, you know when it feels like something's wrong, and you know when it feels like something is right. And if you don't, it's a great thing to work on.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't even imagine how challenging it is as a physician to, I mean, like, you can't exactly write that on an insurance form, like patient ordering tests because patient knows her own body. Like,
Well, I mean, it's so interesting that, you know, one of the symptoms of preeclampsia is a sense of impending doom or a feeling that something's just not right. Like, that's literally
amazing.
a symptom of preeclampsia.
Yeah,
That
like
means
basically this person knows. Yeah.
And so if I have a patient that's telling me something's wrong, then I can't really put a finger on it. I'll still be like, I sent a patient back the other week. I'm like, I know she was just in labor and delivery, but this is happening and this is happening, and she still doesn't feel right. And I kind of trust her that something's wrong. So yeah. And then I'll have other patients that'll be like, okay, well, like, it's time to, by the guidelines, this is the recommendation. They'll be like, yeah, I'm not doing that because I feel like this. And that can be really hard as a doctor, right? And, oh God, but the guidelines and like the data shows and the statistics. I'm supposed to do my job by convincing this person, you know? And sometimes you just have to give them the information, let them do what they need to do, you know? And that's the hard part, I think. Sometimes that's where being a coach helps. It's like, okay, I might not be right. I don't know. This might not be the right thing for this person.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing where your coaching and your medical practice goes.
Yeah,
I think it's a beautiful combination. There's a lot of coaches in our school in the school that we were trained in, who are physicians. It's a beautiful thing to watch them all integrate their coaching with their medical work.
I think my year was the year that it really exploded. There was like 12, and then there was like 124, and now it's even more.
What year was it?
2021 is when I certified. Like, I was started in September of 2020, certified in April of 2021.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's a lot of us.
There are a lot, there really are. But I will say about Grey's Anatomy, there's a lot of coaching gems in that show. And it is I guess that's the good writing.
The doctor didn't write it.
So the medical writing might be a little inaccurate at times. But there are some good gems.
Actually, I should say there's definitely some good physician/coaching gems, but yeah, I mean, I am currently a hospital employee, so I think I'm required to say that whatever I'm saying is not the views of my institution and are my own personal opinions and views.
Put that in the whatever. I'm gonna put this on YouTube. So
little dot to the small writing underneath. Yes.
Emmie's personal unaffiliated opinions. All right. Well, thank you. That was fun.
Thank you. It was great to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Keep connecting.
Yeah.
Bye.
Have a good night.